Good morning. Good morning. Morning. What's the right way to address you? You know, with us here at Dad's in the Picture, we usually call
Yeah,
everyone Dad, but
yeah.
because of your expertise,
But that comes first. So, well, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, but Tabang is fine. But dad comes first.
oh, okay. I'm just asking. Should I call dog? Should I say daddy?
Oh, that's fine. Tabang is fine.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So, Daddy, it's such it's. I mean, I was just going through the stats right now while preparing for this interview,
Yeah,
and it's like cringeworthy to see that out of every three adolescents, there would be a child who has been, in some way or form, you know, almost violated, I could say, sexually violated, and this doesn't even specify just to say it's a female only thing. It's a male and female thing, and this is just in South Africa within a 30, like our less than 50 million people. So like, is there any, like, why does a society even get to this kind of point, just to start it off and have some kind of idea, you
yeah.
know?
I mean, I think that's a very sobering. I remember some while back, even on radio station, they were playing this ping. Saying every 3 minutes or every 10 minutes, somebody's getting abused in some way, shape, or form. And I think it says something about us as people and about where we are and the things that we struggle with, our own histories. Maybe just as an opening thought, I remember when I started working, I was at a clinic, somewhere at a clinic before. I remember my way to work on a Monday, I think it was. As I was walking through the clinic, usually I'd find people sitting on the side waiting for me, because they would have woken up early to get there. So as I was getting there to the office, I remember seeing one little girl, one beautiful little girl. She must have been four or five, and she
Mm,
waved at me. But the way she waved at me, actually, it was like a red flag, until I sat down and her grandmother told me the story of what had happened to her. And she was abused since she was 6 months old, and for her it was sort of a natural thing. And I remember that story because it speaks to the kind of society that we live in, that when we say many adolescents, either male or female, would have been violated somehow, that this thing begins in the home. You think you're safe at church, you think you're safe at the police station, you think you're safe with friends and family, but it's a prevalent issue. Children are abused, and you get to see the effects not in teenage years, in the middle age years, and also in later life, where people are still struggling with the harm that they experienced.
hmm. Sure, no, no, definitely. It's scary. You almost want to lock your own children up, you know, so that they never get to meet or experience that. It's
Yes,
highly unfortunate.
yes, yes. We become a very anxious society. I mean, being a dad of two girls myself, I often tell the story about when we went to the first doctor's appointment, and we
Yes.
were told that it was a girl. One of the first feelings, impulses I had was I wanted to run out and go change every man I meet, because my daughter was coming into the world. And I was surprised that I felt that way, and it just
Yeah.
told me what was in my own subconscious about the kind of society we live in, where we feel very unsafe. Little girls, little boys feel very unsafe, and you almost want to lock your children up, but that's not even good for them if you want them to be productive members in society.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I know I'm a female, you know. I think one of the the kind of issues that we have to face as ladies as well. If we go out, for instance, you know, you always want to have people you trust around you. I remember the one time where just before COVID, when I had gone out with friends, and we were taking pictures of each other's Uber drivers and their
Yeah.
number plates, just to add that extra, you know, safety net for ourselves. That's unfortunately that's just the reality. So just, and then I was just reading about the whole concept around the history of Child Protection Week. I mean, which is observed during the 28th, May 28th to June 4th, and it's basically celebrate or observe or raise awareness more than anything else, so that these children are aware of their rights, so that maybe parents who are experiencing different things are aware that there are things that they can do as well. And now what I wanted to ask you is that what exactly would constitute as sexual abuse? You know.
Um, so when we talk about abuse, we're talking about the misuse of something. When you cross boundaries, you're misusing your child. And so there are different kinds of abuses. You could neglect your child in that you fail to take care of your child. You don't feed them, you don't clothe them, you don't give them what they need. You're abusing them. You could abuse them verbally, in how you talk to them, in how you address them. You misuse the way in which you're supposed to communicate with them. Then you can also abuse them sexually in terms of touching them inappropriately, exposing them to indecent content, through screens or yourself, through asking them to do improper things with each other, through, from watching things to touching them to violating them, to raping them. And that would constitute, sexual abuse, anything of a sexual nature that's inappropriate with a child. Then you when you misuse a child for that, then you are sexually abusing them.
That's a very interesting point. So would you say that the word sexual abuse or the word sexual violation has a more, like an impact that would make someone think twice about it? Does it matter what we call it at all?
I don't know, if it's a difference in kind or if it's a difference in degree. But at the end of the day, how we describe things is very important. I think things should be called for what they are. And so, because sometimes we misuse the terms that somebody sexually violated. But what does that entail? Does it mean that you were shown content? Does it mean that you were touched inappropriately? Does it mean that somebody penetrated you? And for me, I think it should be called what it is, particularly in the circles where we have to be direct. But I suppose when it comes to children, we have to be careful how we describe things. But abuse is abuse is abuse. At the end of the day, if you rape a child, then that's what it is. A crime is a crime. And I think we can argue about the words, but I think there is a violation, and then we can just maybe more specifically talk about what kind of violation there is.
Right, right, right. I think I definitely agree with that. I was just thinking about the example of how, for instance, we teach our girl children, the terms to describe their private parts, and even an uncomfortability around those things. And just the thoughts of now, if for instance I call it, I just try to think of the terms I've heard my family members use. Like if you call it these words, if someone has experienced something that is a violation, how do they then report something like that? About just round about what do we call things? And do you think that's also important in terms of calling it words that are non-vulgar, or calling it exactly what it is, a vagina, a penis?
Yes. I think, we a very important question that you're asking, and I think maybe we have to think about it in this manner, that a child is the adult of tomorrow. And there are things, so you have the same brain as an adult that you had as a child. It's just that you developed it and became more focused. So when it comes to children, what we have to think about is we are preparing somebody for tomorrow. And if we are
Right.
preparing somebody for tomorrow, the way we raise them is that it's very important so in terms of language, to communicate with them properly. That's why even this child language, you talk to your children funny, using funny sounds. And no, who says the no? You're supposed to speak properly and call the private parts for what they are, because then because that's vocabulary you are starting to be able to, you are going to build on. So the conversation starts very early, but you have to call the private parts for what they are. It's a penis, it's a vagina, and to also not make it this parents get uncomfortable, and therefore the children also pick up that if somebody has done something to me now, this awkward thing which I can't talk about. So I think the more we are more direct, this is a vagina, this is a penis, we talk about boundaries, good touch, bad touch, nobody's supposed to touch you here. If somebody does this, then what are you going to do? You start educating them, I think. But we have to then err on when it comes to violation. I think we have to be careful though around what details we give children, because emotionally a human being can handle certain things, and you don't want to at a very early age put in your child's mind the idea that the world is this unsafe place, that they can't explore, that they can't grow, because you cripple them and you instill such fear that then they become anxiety prone adults. I think it's a balance. So call the organs what they are, and then slowly begin to have the conversation with time. So when they are 2, when they are 3, and as they get older, you can start to be more specific, more direct. You can have then it's a long conversation, but it needs to start very early, and also by the parent being comfortable themselves, because your own anxiety makes it difficult for the child to even talk about themselves, or what even, let alone what happened to them.
Absolutely. I see a dad there saying, I'm just reading some of the comments. Parents are the first people to teach our children about matters of sex, but do it using age-appropriate information. Examples. Good point, Daddy Bernard. Estelle Gallagher says, the language you use as adults and the awkwardness, yes. Yeah. So I love what you said. So are you saying that the children will pick up on that anxiety if we are showing a discomfort around?
Definitely. So as I'll go back to saying, children are the adults of tomorrow, and what we are doing as their parents is that we are modeling behavior. So in how we deal with very sensitive topics, how we deal with emotions, how we deal with aggression, how we deal with abuse, and how we carry ourselves, they'll copy that versus the things we say. So we have to model the right and correct behavior so that they learn from us, and they are very observant. Kids are so observant. It's amazing how kids, they're like magnets, particularly if they are young, because at that time their brain is just milking everything, just absorbing the environment. So you have to be okay for your children to be okay. If you have issues in one way or some shape or form, you're going to pass them on to your children. So I do think that adults have to be comfortable themselves so that they can have that conversation. In fact, I remember I was at a conference and a conference a few years ago, they were talking about how somebody had a group with teens. They were talking with teens about where did they first learn about sex and intimacy and all those kind of things. And most of the kids there said they learned it from, say, pornography, from their friends. It was everybody else from media except their parents. And they were actually angry about that, because it's like they didn't get the right kind of information. So it is, in a sense, even a duty or a responsibility for a parent to initiate the conversation at the appropriate stage with the appropriate language, so that you can build on that conversation with time.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Sure. But now what do you say to that a very conservative parent who is like, I'm just not comfortable with that. It just makes me very, very uncomfortable.
Yes, and which is understandable, because I mean, this is your precious child that you don't want to, parents, when you just even think about it, you get so scared that, oh, I'm gonna talk to my child about all this stuff, I'm gonna damage my child's brain. The reality is that we live in a world that, if a child is not prepared, whoever is going to introduce that idea to them will come in a harsh way, and it better be coming from a loving place, which you can do, versus someone else, versus a stranger. So I would say, if you're conservative, it makes sense, because I mean, you don't want to hurt your child, but as parents, you have the responsibility to give your children what they need, and what they need is also information to navigate the world, to protect themselves, to be wise. And so you may be uncomfortable, but start with little things. Start you getting comfortable. Talk to your children, but with the appropriate language. If you struggle, get a, a relative, a friend, somebody you trust who can help you with that conversation.
And then it comes to the trust conversation. So in many instances, the stats actually show that the children are usually abused by someone that they know. So how do I screen everyone or protect my children in who are they around? Like, is there a way that I could be able to see that there's a potential of this and that? Let me just to share a story about myself. My mom is a social worker, and for most of the past 15, 20 years, she's basically been working with children who commit crimes before a certain age, right? Before the age, what do you call them? Before they're even teens. And so from a very young age, she's been very, almost like, her eyes are very sharp towards anything that's sexual violation, but I would also say that it's so extreme that even myself and my siblings, we can't even carry our own children in a certain way because it makes us so uncomfortable. But it's like now, like something as small as just holding your child, we'll have them held with their legs open. Something like that would make her uncomfortable because of what she's seen. But now, what do I screen for if I'm trying to avoid even the slightest in terms of protecting my children?
You're right. So, I mean, you mentioned a few points there, and I think that this is what we have to be careful of as adults. And so when I made the point about, you don't want to be so anxious and introduce those ideas to your child that the world is a very unsafe place, because in a way you want your child to be able to navigate the world. That's what you want. You don't want them to be afraid, but you want them empowered and give them information. You don't want to shelter them. So it starts very little. So what you can start teaching is simple things like boundaries. Boundaries, children learn about personal space, about their body parts, their personal space, who can see them, who can touch them, and so they can start in a way defending themselves from where the body stands. And then you can now also then layer on top of that in how people address them, in what is the proper way. You can teach them then about how people are supposed to engage with you in a respectful way. Already that's another layer that you build on top of that. The other thing is, you can't always police your children, but very often abuse happens when parents are not around, or somebody who a caregiver is not around. So if your children are going somewhere, you want to make sure that you know who's there. You need to make sure that they are able to talk to you. And then the other one that we don't think about is teenage boys and their little siblings. Because there are many cases of good little boys who, because they were going through their own growth as teens, and they've got all these hormones, they started experimenting with their siblings. And so a perpetrator is not some evil person with some horns sticking out there. It could be a brother, an older sister, it could be an uncle. So you want to teach your children boundaries, because then they can start knowing when there's a physical boundary that is crossed, when there's an emotional boundary that is crossed, and they'll be able to communicate, and you are also with them, and then you also protect them from environments that are unsafe, but doing your own background, but you don't want to always panic. You can't lock them up, but I think once a human being is able to tell when a boundary is crossed, they are a little bit equipped to deal with whoever starts saying, looking, touching, approaching in an appropriate way. They'll be able to tell that I don't like what you're doing, whether you said something or you approached me in a way that I didn't like, and therefore you've begun to equip them.
Yeah, that's a mouthful. I love all of that. And now my question to you about that is, and as a mom who has a teenager, he's just turned 13, and obviously he's also starting to experience all these sexual things because of the hormones and whatnot. How do I then safely is there a safely allowing him to explore where he will not violate other people? Is there anything I could do, in terms of that? And what maybe could you be your tips? Because I'm sure these things do come, like a conversation will allow for someone to know the boundaries, even for himself, to say, you can do this, but for yourself, with yourself, do not involve a second person. Because one of the biggest fears I've had when just with like when you were speaking about the fear you had when you were having a daughter, my fear when I had my son was, what if he becomes the perpetrator and abuses another woman's child, a daughter, all of those things, and sisters and cousins and whatnot, and that would really make me so upset. So so how do I then bridge that gap to say that I know, as much as I know that he will want to at some point explore his sexuality, but what's the safer way for him to be able to do that? Is there a safe way?
Yeah, so good question. So I think where we have to start is, like, for example, I was reading the other day, we're reading these storybooks with the kids. There's one animal book we have there, and I see that they talk about mating. They'll say, and the birds mate, and the elephants mate, and then things like that. And I think is to think about sex as a natural thing.
Right.
That happens to have that in mind. Sex is a natural thing, but there is the appropriate time, and then there is also responsibility. The responsibility of there's a way you feel, there's your body, but there's someone else's body, and so you respect yourself, you respect other people. There are things that we ask, so you don't take what's not yours. You ask, but there's also an appropriate time. And then as you're giving them information, if you talk about say it's a lesson about sex and eggs and sperm and how somebody can become pregnant, that's linked to also the responsibility. If there's a baby, how do we work, do we take care of the baby? And I think information empowers a person versus shying away or scaring them. But if you empower them, they're in a position to make better decisions. And now I would say then also the conversation about responsibility and timing being very important. Along with that, what you want to do with your children is, along with the conversation about sex, you want to be talking about their destiny, their purpose, what are they going to do, and then you are able to fit in then, where does sex fit in with your life, with your studies, with your purpose. And I think once you have a broader conversation and you can fit in the sexual stuff in there, I think they are able to understand that I've got certain goals and there are certain things I can do for myself, or there are things that can get in the way, if I touch something appropriately. So you have to give them that information and link it to their own life story, where they're going. They'll know when it's appropriate to then act sexually, in what way, what are the boundaries and things like that, and respect for another human being.
Oh wow, okay. I love that. I made notes of everything you said because I think that's the conversation I want to be having now with my son.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of us can learn so much from that, because it's something that's going to happen. I'd like to say, you know,
Yes.
but we want to make sure, the one thing that I've always been very clear about is the consent part of it. And I hope that it goes down up all the way up to his subconscious to understand why it's important that whatever happens in terms of any sexual relationship, it's always a two-way street, you know. And then now in just moving on, okay, let me just quickly read a comment from Dad's in the picture there on the site. It says, how do we handle a child who reports that they have been touched inappropriately?
Yes, very, very important question. And the typical response is that, parents, they they jump up, they they get upset, and they hijack the situation. And then now it's about you. It's not about the child anymore. And now the child just thinks, oh my goodness, what did I do? So what you want to do is, when a child tells you what happened, you want to figure out, you want to thank the child, thank you for telling me this, and you want to figure out what happened. You want to understand what really happened, and then you as an adult, you investigate. I think you get the facts, you investigate, and if it's things like you have to report, then it's stuff you'll have to report. So I'll say, first, get the facts. Don't panic, don't hijack the situation and get so upset that the child is regretting telling you. And so there's a way you can handle it as an adult. If your child has in fact been inappropriately touched,
Right.
you'll know when you need to report it, address the person, take your child for to a hospital, or if it's something like you have to now have a family meeting, confront this person. But I think so get the information and then follow up, but don't panic and hide the situation. And some parents also hit the children, and they hit the child, and blame the child and tell the child that you are lying, things that didn't happen. How do you know? You wanted this thing to happen. And so, and if you talk to adults who've been through that, they'll tell you about the guilt they just struggled with. I told this parent, and the way they just reacted, they just leave me, they hit me, they shut me out, they still laugh for that person, they did nothing. And so you want to get the information and then address the situation appropriately. If it's reporting and criminal procedures, that's what you follow. If it's something like having to remove the child or talking to the person, then that's what you have to do.
Right. Sure. I think I can imagine why, as any parents, you would probably go through the roof. But I think what is really hard is in my own personal experience, when it is a family member and you still have to have some type of relationship with this person and stuff like that, it becomes a bit tricky. So you do have to handle it with a bit of care, and it's also that whole thing of maybe taking that responsibility to say the details of what exactly happened. Sometimes it's not the full, not that we don't believe our children, but it's not exactly what it seems. In my personal experience, something like that happened with my daughter, but we ended up even going all the way to opening a police case and then having her checked, only to find, like, luckily nothing happened that was a penetrative thing, but it was an inappropriate sitting. Like the cousin was actually making her sit inappropriately, and she felt uncomfortable, and then she showed me what the cousin was saying. But obviously she was still a child, so I didn't really understand what she meant. But I started with involving the police and then getting the information. But I can tell you that because this is still he's actually my nephew. Even though he's a teen, he's like 16, 17 now. If we have family gatherings where he's around, I want my daughter right next to me, because I'm very uncomfortable with him around. When it's my son and him, they can do whatever. But if my daughter's in the picture, it makes me very, very uncomfortable. But I would also say I'm glad that I went about it in that way, because I really was feeling quite murderous at that time and infuriated,
Yeah.
But I love what you said in terms of the steps that you do. So then what I want to come to now is, what do I see? In my instance, my child showed me in terms of the action, but I don't think that's always the case with married parents. What are we looking out for to see that something or some kind of violation or something that's inappropriate could have happened to our children?
Yes, thank you very much. So I think for me, it starts with you understanding your child, right? And that's why you have to be involved with your child. And you know what your child is like when they wake up in the morning, the kind of energy they have. You know what they like in the afternoon. So you have to really know your child. So when there's a shift, you might notice. Perhaps you have a talkative child, and all of a sudden they're not talkative anymore, they are withdrawn, they said. Or perhaps you have this quiet child, but all of a sudden they're acting aggressive, or and then in play, one of the things you'll notice is how children play, how they play with their toys, how they play with each other. You hear the content that, hang on, there's something going on. Did my child see something, or did somebody do something to them? So in how children play, it usually manifests itself. I've been to, I remember many years ago, I was at a school. They said there was this young girl, she was possessed by demons, and we inquired why. They said, no, she sits with her legs open and then she does this. And that child had been sexualized. So you observe sexual behavior, with a child, how they engage with other children. There's this sexualized play in how they connect with each other, play with each other. And so you observe things like that. All of a sudden, your child is complaining. They used to like, say, going to school or visiting somewhere, or a certain house or place, a person, and all of a sudden they tell you, I don't want to go there, and they throw a fit, and you're like, hang on, what changed? Don't force them, investigate.
Right.
And so typically there's a shift, the performance at school, they might start being, not performing well. They might start, say, withdrawing, being aggressive. So you'll just emotionally, physically, they might have some scars. They might flinch. There's a way they respond to you. So what I'd say is, know your child and notice when there's a shift, that they are not something different about, my child is not acting like my child. So, and therefore you need to start watching, did something change, if they visit somewhere, and you spend, especially the.
Oh, did the network go back there? I don't know.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I lost you a bit there.
So my phone was complaining about something, but it's fine now. I think we're fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you were saying that notice your child.
Yeah,
which
so,
is very
so you.
crucial.
Yeah. So the key would be, you watch your child. You watch them. You understand them. You understand their energy. You understand how they relate to you. And then when something has happened to them, there'll be a shift. As I said, the talkative child will be more quiet. The quiet child is a little bit more aggressive. The way they play with their toys, they play with each other. They're touching themselves inappropriately. They are drawing. They at schools, they'll say all of a sudden this child is drawing funny pictures. What they watch, what they say, and so things like that. Then something is amiss, and then you need to follow up.
Right. Oh, I love that. I think that definitely. I think the hardest justification I've ever heard from parents when it comes to that to things like that is the kind of talk where parents will say, but I really don't have time. I'm not home. I'm not the primary caregiver because I have to work. So like you almost want to say that is, you maybe some of us have the luxury of having the kind of work that allows us to have a lot of time with our children so we can do all of that. But what about the mother who leaves too early and comes home too late? What can they possibly do to be able to do that, to notice such things?
You're touching me in my studio with that question. So that question, it's something I'm actually very, very passionate about. I think so. Maybe let me start with the. I think in the space we live in, people have to work. People have to make sacrifices to feed their children, to feed their
Yeah.
families. There is a real struggle there. So that I do acknowledge, but and maybe let me. The other thing is, I think many of us also sacrifice our children for a certain kind of lifestyle. We pursue other things, we make other things important. And what I'd like to remind parents is that, your children don't have a defense. Very often when I work with abused people, young women, even moms, and what you get to hear is, when you ask the question, what was happening, where was this person, and you usually get the idea that my mom, my dad, people who were supposed to care for me were not there. They were busy with something else when this happened to me. And it would be my plea that you
That's heartbreaking.
it's hard, because it's like, even when you die, like, one of the things I feel like, your God, keep me alive, because I've seen what happens when you're not around, what happens to your children. And
Yeah.
so my plea is, if you can be around, for your children, if you can make the effort to be there for your children, then do it. If you can live a certain lifestyle, but you are there for your children, I think that's what you
Yeah.
need to do. I don't see what could be more important than these people you've brought into the world. And I do say,
Amen
I
to that.
understand the financial situation, but you do have the responsibility, and you are your children's protection. If you are not there, many things happen to your children. So this also includes, what we do is, we have children when we're young, and then we ship them off to mom,
Yep.
to go or go, and then we go and we build a career, and then we
Right.
get surprised later on when your child is like this different person. They have different
Yeah.
values, and I would say, as early as possible, if you can be with your children, do that.
Yes. Absolutely. Oh, definitely. I agree with that. I think that uh, one of the things that I've been considering, because of the change in my career, having to travel a little bit more than I had planned. And I mean, I've been very blessed throughout the COVID. I was home, but now having to bring in a caregiver to watch my children, I've been considering getting like secret cameras in the house. You know, just as my daughter's 8 years old, and though she tells me a lot of things, I always worry that you never know who's the next nanny who comes into the picture, who may scare her into not telling whatever. But just to safeguard myself and my anxiety and all of that, it's something I'm actually really looking at, just to have peace of mind, at least to be able to hear what's happening, not necessarily to see everything that's happening, but to hear while I'm on the road. And I know that this is not always a reality for everyone in terms of affordability, whether it's Wi-Fi and all of those things. But I definitely agree with you. When we wanna be able to say that the children know that we cared for them and we're willing to fight for them. I think that we can definitely agree on. And
Yeah.
now moving on to a little bit of a very touching part of this whole conversation is trying to understand now what are the conversation of today is what is the actual impact of your child if they have been I mean, I heard you mention just now in the previous conversation about how a child who was treated in a certain way maybe has the way she treats herself, opening the legs and stuff like that. But what are the actual psychological impact on a child, whether it's a girl or a boy, who has been affected in this way, and maybe both in an untreated way, in that maybe no one has noticed and put them in for help, your psychologists, social workers, all of that.
Before I just want to turn my phone uh, because I need to charge it, and
Oh no,
just tell
that's
me
fine.
are we still fine? Are we no?
I can't see you.
You can.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, now I can see you. Now I got you.
I'll just have
Perfect.
to maneuver a little bit.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm just.
Perfect.
The question was, what's the impact, right?
What's the impact? Like I'm talking both ways. If a child has experienced this, no one has noticed, and it just lingers on until their adulthood. And if the child, maybe I see and then I find help for them, for the child in terms of being violated in that way.
So what normally happens, and because I've seen too many. I'm actually sad that I've seen so many people struggle with this, and so we normally say how the first time they say the first cut is the deepest, right? And
Right.
one of the things you'll observe is, say when as a psychologist you are taking somebody's history,
Right.
and what you want to know is, how did you grow up and all this, and then you're also interested in their sexual history,
Right.
um, how you were introduced to it, and why that
Right.
is important is that's what you carry with you for a
Hmm.
long time. And so, for example, if I can use an example, if you go to a child, you take a child to the dentist, and
Mm-hmm.
that and experience was a horrible one. And
Yes.
if you see a coat or you pass by a hospital, they start freaking out, right? And
Yep.
it's similar
All the
to, if
nurse.
some exactly, if somebody introduces to you intimacy and sex in a bad way, and so you have all these complicated feelings about it, and now
Yeah.
you struggle with your own body. So you notice, so this thing can be lifelong. I've seen people who are married, have children in their
Mm.
50s, in their 60s, they still struggle with the abuse that they experienced. Many
Mm.
married people will know this to be true, that even
Mm-hmm.
their wives or their husbands are still struggling with this thing. And
Mm.
so the effects can be a long time. They can arrest your life, in that, this thing has happened to you. Later on, it becomes, you can even become an activist of it. Now, you maybe had dreams to become a doctor or this, and then now this becomes your life. Now you have to go after every perpetrator. So I've seen that can arrest your life. It becomes your
Right.
life story, and you are not Ayanda anymore. You are not Thabang anymore. But your life is about what somebody did to you, and so it can happen like that. People also hate their bodies.
Mm.
They feel that their bodies are dirty. I've also known to people who bath down there. They like scrub themselves, injure themselves because they feel so
Oh
dirty. They
goodness.
don't. When you say "I love you," they don't believe.
Mm.
When you talk to a person, the person would say things like, "I know you just want sex. Is that what you want?" So then conversations become about, "I know you just want to use me to get to the point." And
Mm.
so they struggle with relationships. Sometimes they can struggle with anxiety. Sometimes they can struggle with depression. And
Mm.
so they can become very sensitive. People who are
Oh, are we having a network issue? Okay. Okay, let me read the comment meanwhile. From Dad's in the Picture. Early sexual exposure to sex influences how the rest of that person's life turns out and their outlook on relationships. Estelle says, so crucial to know your child and notice when behavior changes. Absolutely. Daddy Bernard is saying, we need to teach our children about their body parts and tell them that some are private and not for everyone to see, except mommy and daddy and also a doctor, but in the presence of mommy and daddy. Daddy Subusisa says, I like how you make it easy on how to talk to children about their body parts for them to understand better. Yeah. Just to add from a personal story, while we wait for Daddy Thabang to come back, one of the things, so as a single mom, I think I had a very hard raising a son who's now a teen as well. I think we had a really hard time in terms of talking about things around his private part, especially when he started to getting into these preteen years. And one of the things that I'll always constantly be explaining to him is that, a private part, penis, vagina, both my children actually, is just like any part of our bodies. It's like our ears, our nose. Yes, obviously it does need to be kept in a place where it's kept privately in terms of not being seen. But it's exactly that, in terms of washing it, in terms of taking care of it. Obviously, there's different things that are expected from a girl and a boy because of the anatomy of it. But though I found that having those kind of conversations has helped him be more open to not feeling uncomfortable to talking about, because as I'm saying, as a mommy raising a son, once you bring up conversations about, how do you pee, you have to hold your penis when you pee into the toilet seat so that it doesn't mess up the whole thing. And for a very long time, it made him so uncomfortable. But I had to find a way to get him to not think of it as this deep and comfortable thing, but just a part of his body. And for me, that's one of the best things I did. Oh yeah, there you go. Hello, you're back.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. So yes, you are continuing. I heard you talk
No.
about. Yeah. So
I was
as I
just sure. Go ahead, Daddy.
No, I was saying, yeah, and so it can affect you for your, for your life. This can be a very difficult thing, a wound that colors your life, and it becomes your life story. So I've seen that, but I've also seen people, I've worked with people who've, after they say they've so you asked about people who never told anyone. So I've seen that's what happens to them. I've seen the ones who spoke about it, and some have wanted to confront the person, and
Right.
then some have, and it has been very cathartic for them. It helped them. Some just wanted to talk about it, and they've, their life, they integrate their life. So they say, this happened to me, but this is not me, and so it's part of my story, but it's not me. And so then they start, building other things. It can go both ways, where if you are abused, it's something that's going to stick with you, or you could get to a place where you integrate, like all traumas, right? You say, I've been traumatized and this is what happened to me, and you grieve what you've lost, and but
Right.
you are able to integrate and build a life. So it's like a chapter in the story of your life.
Right. I can't. The audio has gone there, Daddy.
No,
Can
I
you say
kept
something?
quiet.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine. So I love that. So so you basically think that if a person has experienced something of the sort, as a parent, it's better maybe to look for help, so that the child can get assistance and confront it, and maybe even get to a point where they can close that chapter and move on
Yeah.
to the next.
Yes, yes, because so what happens with us human beings is that every time we go through an experience, we tell ourselves something about it. So I went through
Right,
this, therefore. And so what we want is that, so when your child has went through something like this, you want them to integrate that story. This is what happened to me, but what I learned from that situation was A, B, C, D, and how I want to build my life going forward is this, that, and so that's what you want to have the conversation. That's why if you stifle it, you make it difficult for the person to process what they went through, and that's why
right,
a lot of people who keep quiet about it still struggle. It's like a wound that was never treated. So talking
right.
about it is hard in the beginning, but you heal better in the long run. So you, and the aim is the more you talk, the better you understand your story. You layer it, you get other parts of it.
Right.
Yes, this happened to you, but it didn't destroy you. Yes, this happened
Yes.
to you, but you stood up for yourself. Yes, that,
Right.
so once you're able to build those things, you feel more, as I say, integrated, and you're able to live your life though you've been injured in that way.
Right. Okay. No, I love that. I think that basically just that sums up the importance of us being able to ask for help,
Yep.
you know, in dealing with these things. I don't know, what would you say is your experience with, I'd like to say, oh, I always say like the Black community, especially looking for help with these kind of difficult conversations. As a psychologist, for instance, are you seeing a lot more people coming out to say, this is what happened to me and I need help? Is it something that we're starting to be aware of? That there's a
Yes.
potential help?
Yes, usually, I work in different places, which is the beauty of it. Um, so I work in clinics in co-maketioning, I work in towns. I see very different groups of people, and so the help
Right,
usually somebody would have been to the hospital. They've got these headaches that don't go away. They can't
right,
sleep. It presents itself in some physical form, and
right,
hypertension and all that. When you talk about it, to me, it sounds like a lot of families need to have a lot of family meetings, very
right.
honest family meetings. What happened, and and what are we going to do, so that this person does not feel uncomfortable at family gatherings, when they have to visit a certain house, and so we have to deal with that properly. And then there are the options also for therapy, where the person can get to explore and reintroduce themselves to themselves, be okay with their own body, be okay with
Mm,
their own destiny and their own story. And that's what things like proper therapy and counseling will provide for a person. But I do think a lot of what we struggle with as Black people is our culture is that we keep it hush hush, we keep it in the family. We don't want to insult so and so.
yeah.
But I don't and that makes it difficult for a person who's been violated, because they feel,
Mm,
so everybody's peace is more important than what happened to me.
right.
And so then I trust you, then so things like that. And so I do think there is now, because we talk about these things, people watch shows, people hear
Yeah.
radio, and then they are aware. People are able to talk to their moms. Mom, when this happened to me, it hurt me that this is how you responded to me. Parents apologize, and they'll even say, but I didn't understand it then, but I know now. So the more information there is, I'm finding that people deal better with it now.
Uh, I love that. And I think one of the comments now, it just has disappeared from my screen, was basically just talking to the whole, how do you deal with that whole let's keep in the family syndrome? You know, there it is. How do we address the let's keep it in the in the family syndrome when a child has been sexually abused?
So I'll start by saying, one, as I mentioned earlier, when when it happens to the child, right? And so the way we respond to the child, it can also look like you told me this thing and I went and I acted all crazy, and now if the family is ruined because you told me this. So you have to be cautious with that. Hence, you have to be calm, get the facts. But if it means we are going to draw a line and we're not going to be family anymore because you don't want to acknowledge, because you violate my child, then it's something I'm personally willing to do. And so we can't keep it in the family at the expense of a child struggling, because then they go on to develop strange habits. All of a sudden we surprised, why is this person dating people, why is this person drinking, abusing drugs, and but because they don't feel safe at home. So I would say, from the child's perspective, you respond to them, you thank them, you help them, you protect them, and then you deal with it as the adults, decisively. If we have to confront each other, that's what we're going to do. If we have to stop
Yeah.
coming to your house, that's what we are going to have to do. If you are not remorseful or willing to get help, then we're not going to keep it in the family. I've seen adults who are still upset because the one parent said, but you can't get your brother arrested. What will people say? But they feel, oh, so it's okay. But what he did to me is okay. So that's what people struggle with.
Yeah.
And sometimes what people want is not so much that you get arrested or whatever. They want an acknowledgement. They want you to say, you hurt me, and you hurt me, and you need to say, yes, I hurt you, and I can see how it has affected you. I'm sorry, like a genuine acknowledgement of, listen, I'm not making up all this stuff. Because the more you deny and you keep it in the family, they feel like losing their minds because you did something to me very bad and you are acting as if nothing happened, and it's very upsetting for a person. We gaslight them is what we do.
Would you also say there's like a cycle as well of abuse where oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm saying
Yes,
like
I
a
can.
cycle of abuse where you find out that even the person who's the perpetrator might have experienced that maybe, and it's the reason why
Yes.
they're doing it, not necessarily because it's
Yes. Definitely. So what I found actually is, once somebody starts reporting, all the other cousins and the aunts and someone else in the family says, me too, me too, me too, and then there's four, even the parents. So when we keep quiet about it, we perpetuate it, because remember, as I said, when we go through an experience, we must integrate it. So if somebody does something to you and you have a strange relationship with your body, then late in life you're going to exercise that strangeness with other people, because you never got the chance to heal, to integrate it. So, and that's why we don't need to keep it hush hush, because and we know psychologically, whatever you suppress will spring up in a bad way. Whatever you
right.
suppress will manifest 3 to 4 times even more.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree. Let's see. I have a comment here from Daddy Carabo. Says, I think abuse truly is a cycle. Experiencing it normalizes it, and hurt people hurt people. Daddy Bernard says, we must be reminded as parents that our children can be sexually abused online and social media as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. So I think we're almost at the end of the show. I've learned so much, Daddy. Thank you so much for bringing all your knowledge, Daddy Thabang. It's been I mean, I feel like this is such a tough conversation. you know. And let me ask you quickly before we end our show, if I have experienced this, and maybe I don't necessarily want to go to a psychologist, what is the one thing I could do maybe to help integrate it so that I can move on? Let's say, for instance, I experienced it as a young person or something like that, and I just want to close that chapter and move on now. What is the one thing maybe that you could give us as a tip that a person can do for themselves?
Find somebody who you feel comfortable with and talk about your story. And
Mm-hmm.
and the thing about stories is that the more you talk about something, you start seeing different angles about it. And so I would say the first step would be to find a safe person or space to talk about it, and then as you talk, you retell the story and other aspects of it, because you'll talk about the hurt, but as the more you talk, you also talk about what you've been able to do with your life since then also, and how you're not afraid anymore, how you've changed, how you've grown. So the first step is to talk about it with somebody you trust, and I've seen that people get better once they have somebody who listens to them.
Right. And and yourself, Daddy, where can anyone who needs to get your to work with you, for instance, get hold of you?
Well, I'm at 782 Pretoria Street, or all the
Mm-hmm.
information is on my website, www.thabantlaka.co.za, www.thabantlaka.co.za.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much, Daddy. We appreciate your practical advice. I always find that when you can give practical advice, then it stays, you know. So I really appreciate it. And I thank you so much on behalf of Dads in the Picture.